This spirit was terrorizing the residents of Hammersmith to the point of physical harm, and Smith sets off to find the Hammersmith ghost and end things once and for all. What is with this freaking pimple? Do you see that? I will never have clear skin. Hey guys, welcome back, or if you are new, welcome to my channel. My name is Courtney, and I'm here to give you the creeps. If you're into true horror, I highly suggest that you hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell so you're notified every single time that I upload, because I get on here every single week and tell you guys another true and scary story. So today's Unresolved Mystery, guys, is a case that I'm really excited to share with you, because it is a ghost story turned true crime case. I know, it's been a really long time since we talked about ghosts on this channel. Today we're talking about the Hammersmith Ghost Murder Case, which if you haven't heard of that case, don't worry, because I hadn't heard of it either until about 24 hours ago when a friend of mine sent me an article about it, and for what I feel like should be obvious reasons, it kind of blew my mind. Like, ghost and murder, like, how does that happen? So for that reason, I thought it would be fun for me to get on here today and tell you guys the story of the Hammersmith ghost and the murder case that is tied to the entity or spirit that is the Hammersmith ghost. You with me? Okay, cool. Let's get into it. So our story begins late in the year 1803, which means that I don't know if we're gonna actually have pictures. I guess we'll find out. Editing Courtney, let me know. And we are in the town of Hammersmith, England, which was located right on the Thames River. Now, if I understood correctly from my research, the town of Hammersmith was and still is a London suburban town, which is located only about 5 miles away from Buckingham Palace. So when you think about it, this town is just on the outskirts of London, England. And right there at the end of 1803, Hammersmith as a town was having a bit of a ghost problem. I know, I'm already living for this story. Okay, so you're probably wondering, what do you mean by a ghost problem, right? Well, apparently, during the evenings in Hammersmith in late 1803, people started reporting having encounters with a specter shrouded in white that they claimed was causing a bit of a ruckus in the neighborhood. And after a few different encounters with this spirit, the residents of Hammersmith actually started to theorize that it may have been one of their neighbors who had met his demise in 1802, and I guess had some unfinished business to attend to. Now, regardless of how this haunting came to be, this spirit was terrorizing the residents of Hammersmith to the point of physical harm. I know, no thank you. For example, on one occasion, the driver of an 8-carriage horse ended up abandoning his horses, the carriage, and the passengers that he was driving through town after witnessing this ghost kind of walking around in Hammersmith, which essentially just means that he left all of these passengers that he was technically responsible for to their own devices against the spirit who was obviously trying to cause harm to the people in town. Good job, bro. On another occasion, a woman was walking past the town church at around 10 p.m., and she claimed that at that moment, she saw a white specter come up from behind one of the tombstones. And it was apparently then that this spirit or specter started to chase her down the road. I hate it for you, I'm sorry. Now, despite her effort to get away from the spirit itself, it ended up catching up to her and, I guess, frightening her to the point where she passed out right there in the street. Honestly, same. Then a short while later, some of her neighbors there in Hammersmith came across her just kind of unconscious, lying in the street. Embarrassing. And they were able to wake her up and kind of ask her what happened. From there, they were able to take her home, where they tucked her into bed and she went back to sleep, and reportedly, she never woke up. Shady. Now, one of the most notable experiences that I found during my research was that of a man named Thomas Groom, who was walking home one evening when he decided to take a shortcut through the town cemetery. This is literally the start of, like, Sleepy Hollow or something. And it was there that Thomas felt 2 hands wrap around his neck before violently shaking him. Now, at some point during this altercation, Thomas was actually able to turn around, and he was surprised to find that there was no one there, even though he still felt these 2 hands very obviously pressing against his neck. That said, in a last-ditch effort to defend himself against this being or spirit or whatever it is that was attacking him, he ended up punching outwards towards the unseen force, where his hand collided with something that felt like a man's overcoat, even though there was no one in front of him at all. I would have moved out. I would have left the town. London is literally like right there. within spitting distance. Now, all of that in mind, guys, those are just a few of the dozens of different encounters and experiences that the people of Hammersmith had with the spirit back in 1803. However, as 1803 came to a close, the residents of Hammersmith started to theorize that this wasn't the spirit of one of their deceased neighbors, but instead was actually just a person dressing up as a ghost with the intention of terrorizing people there in town. And that is some scooby-doo BS if I ever did hear any, you know? Now, for that reason, some of the men living there in Hammersmith in 1803 and 1804 decided that they had had enough of this spirit and ended up creating a little, like, Watchmen group to kind of figure out who this individual was and then put them behind bars because they were responsible for a lot of murder and mayhem. Did I just look like kind of a crazy person? I'm so sorry if my eye was like twitchy. Now, by this point in the timeline, the residents of Hammersmith were refusing to leave their home at night unless they absolutely had to, and they would avoid certain parts of town altogether if they knew them to be hotspots for encounters with this spirit. Like, they just wouldn't go to these places at all. Not a way to live, if you ask me. So this Watchmen group felt that if they could bring this individual to justice, they would be able to go back to their normal lives and stop living in fear. And they come close a couple of times. For example, on one occasion, one of the watchmen actually encountered the spirit and started to give chase as it fled. According to this watchman, he had witnessed the spirit removing a white sheet that it was wearing, which revealed a man wearing normal clothes underneath running away. Shady, shady, shady. Which to me only corroborates the theory that this wasn't actually a spirit, and in fact was just a dude who was terrorizing the town dressed up as a ghost. Because what else do you do when you're living in England in 1803, I guess? Literally anything but that. You could do anything but that. Now, all of that in mind, guys, by January of 1804, one of the Hammersmith residents named Francis Smith had gotten, like, really fed up with the Hammersmith ghost, and he decides that he's going to take matters into his own hands. That said, he didn't want to just, like, reveal the identity of this individual and then put said individual behind bars. No, he does not. Instead, Francis Smith wants to end things for good. Now, around this point in the timeline, one of Smith's neighbors named Thomas Millwood was also getting really fed up with the Hammersmith ghost, but for like a different reason entirely. Now, apparently Millwood was actually a bricklayer, and his uniform for that job consisted of white pants, white shirt, white jacket, white everything. And for obvious reasons, a lot of the other residents there in Hammersmith often mistook him as the Hammersmith ghost because he was a dude dressed in all white. How unfortunate. And this had apparently really started to bother Millwood because everywhere he went, people would be like, oh no, there's the Hammersmith ghost, run away. There was even one occasion where someone accused him of being the Hammersmith ghost, and Millwood basically told him, I'm not, and I can prove it. If you want, I can punch you in the face. Which to me is just hilarious. So, on January 3rd of 1804, Francis Smith sets out to end the entirety of this Hammersmith ghost situation, while simultaneously, Millwood is heading home from work when he decides to stop by his parents' house to visit with his mother and sister. At around 10:30 p.m., Francis Smith encounters fellow watchman Thomas Girdler in the street and tells him of his plan to murder the Hammersmith ghost. Just cash, like, oh, you know what I'm doing tonight? Now, for obvious reasons, this kind of piqued Girdler's interest, and he ended up offering to meet up with Smith after the deed was done to, I guess, help him with whatever you're supposed to do after you murder a ghost, if that's even possible. From there, they plan to finish out their patrols separately, and then meet back at the White Hart pub once everything is said and done to kind of process all of the information and move forward. After they get this plan together, Girdler goes off on his own patrol, and Smith sets off to find the Hammersmith ghost and end things once and for all. Now, as for Millwood, a few hours had actually passed since he stopped by his parents' home, and he decides that it's time for him to head back to his own residence. So he gets up and tells his mother and sister goodbye before heading out the front door into the streets. This is where he runs into none other than Francis Smith himself. Not a good sign, now is it? That being said, back inside his parents' home, Millwood's sister was actually walking across the front door when she heard a man outside slurring a bunch of different threats into the night. These threats included, "Who are you? What are you? And I will shoot you." Things are not looking good for Thomas Millwood. Apparently, along with these threats, his sister saw a flash of light out of the front window of the home, along with what sounded like gunfire. And this obviously alarmed her enough to rush out into the streets to make sure her brother was okay, and it is then that she discovers her brother's body lying dead in the street. She's obviously alarmed and starts looking around for anyone who could have possibly done this to her brother. However, at that point, Smith had already retreated back to the White Hart pub. Now, once he arrives back at the pub, Smith tells Girdler exactly what happens, and the pair, along with 2 other watchmen, head back to the scene where they make, honestly, a not so shocking discovery at all. Because it was there that they found that there wasn't a ghost lying dead in the street. No, they did not. Instead, they find the body of none other than Thomas Millwood. From there, the 4 men ended up carrying his body to the Black Lion pub, where they summoned a coroner in a pub. From there, the coroner examined the body and soon declared the cause of death as willful murder. Awkward. Wasn't actually a ghost after all, now was it? Now with this discovery, Smith ends up confessing, and he's pretty much immediately charged with murder and taken to jail, where he awaits his trial on January 13th of 1804. Now that being said, guys, this trial within and of itself is a pretty prominent one within British legal history, and that is because Francis Smith pleaded not guilty to the charge of murder, even though he had admitted to killing Thomas Millwood on January 3rd of 1804. How does that happen, you might ask? Well, apparently, according to Smith's testimony, he was so frightened on the night that the crime took place that he had mistaken Millwood as the actual ghost, and that he ended up panic firing his weapon out of fear. Great. It was for that reason that Smith felt like he wasn't guilty of the actual murder charge, because he hadn't actually intended on firing his weapon at a human being, and instead was firing at what he thought was a ghost. I call BS on that, okay? So think about it this way. The entire purpose of this Watchmen group that Smith was a part of was to find the individual that was dressing up as a ghost and terrorizing the people in Hammersmith. So either way, he had gone out that night with the intention to kill the individual underneath the ghost sheet. You see how his story has holes. Well, the judge that was presiding over the case, Lord Chief Baron MacDonald, yes, that is his real title, saw those plot holes as well. And for that reason, he ended up addressing the court, stating that this crime couldn't be anything but murder, because, of course, he had intended to go out and kill whoever it was that was terrorizing the town dressed as a ghost. And even if he was upset about the fact that he was being terrorized by said individual, it didn't give him the right to go out and shoot him. He is spilling some truth tea out here, okay? That said, after this trial is over and all the testimonies have been given to the jury, they end up going and deliberating for a short time before coming back with a guilty verdict. However, it wasn't for murder. No. It was not. They actually said that Smith was guilty for nothing other than manslaughter. It's a bit shady, don't you think? After receiving this verdict, Lord Chief Baron MacDonald reminded the jury yet again that the charge was for murder and that this couldn't be anything other than murder. Not manslaughter, not an accident, cold-blooded murder. And for that reason, he had them go back and deliberate once more on whether or not Smith was guilty or not guilty of murder. After a little while more of deliberation, the jury returns with yet again another guilty verdict. However, this time it was for the murder of Thomas Millwood. And from there, Francis Smith was sentenced to be hanged the following Monday. Now, all of that in mind, guys, this case had a lot of controversy and public interest at the time, and for that reason, MacDonald ended up handing the case over to the Crown to kind of double check and make sure that sentence was fair, I guess. And by January 25th of 1804, King George III ended up overturning that sentence and instead sentenced Smith to 1 year of manual labor. I don't know if I agree with that, but okay. Now that said, guys, it's been over 200 years since the story actually took place, and there is still one unanswered question that sits at the center of the story. And that, of course, is the question of who was the Hammersmith ghost. Let's talk about theories, shall we? Now, the first theory to me is the most likely of all 3 theories that I'm going to be sharing with you today, and that is the theory that the Hammersmith ghost was just a resident dressed up as a ghost with the intention of causing a lot of chaos there in town, which is exactly what pretty much everyone back then thought it was, am I right? And if that's the case, it seems likely to me that said individual had either fled the town once Millwood was murdered, or otherwise just stopped with the murder and mayhem because someone had already taken the fall for his crimes, you know? I don't know, to me that one makes the most sense, but let's go ahead and move on to theory number 2, which places the blame all on the town shoemaker that went by the name of Graham. Now, apparently Graham was known to be a bit of a trickster when it came to his employees, and he liked to pull a lot of pranks on his employees in the evening time when they were closing up shop. For that reason, in January of that year, he ended up getting arrested and charged with being a nuisance. Can you imagine going to jail with that as your charge? Like, what are you in for, bro? I'm a nuisance. Now, according to some of Graham's employees, he had this weird habit of dressing up like the Hammersmith Ghost with the intention of scaring specifically his employees as they were closing up shop. However, when he was questioned about it, he said that he was only doing that to scare his employees and wasn't actually causing all of the chaos that was going on in town due to the Hammersmith Ghost. That being said, either way, after he was arrested, the Hammersmith Ghost experiences kind of stopped, and therefore a lot of people believe that it was actually Graham who was causing all of the ruckus to begin with. Now that being said, guys, there is one final theory that I want to share with you guys, and to me it's the most fun and spooky of all of them, and that is the theory that claims that the Hammersmith Ghost was just that, a ghost. And that is because the area today and just throughout history has been known to be very paranormally charged, and therefore a lot of people feel like the Hammersmith Ghost was actually causing a lot of terror, pain, and mayhem in the Hammersmith area in 1803 and 1804. Now, with all of that in mind, guys, those are just theories that could possibly answer the question of who was the Hammersmith Ghost, but at the same time, we still don't have any true and hard evidence that any one of these could even be the actual cause of this Hammersmith Ghost situation, and for that reason, this case still remains unresolved 200 years later, and it just blows my mind. That being said, that's pretty much all of the information that I have for you in regards to this case, and therefore we are at the end of our video. If you made it all the way here to the end and liked what you saw, make sure you give me a big thumbs up. It really helps out my channel. Also, leave a comment down below letting me know which theory you believe most. Do you think it was a person, or do you think it was actually the spirit of somebody who lived in the town and had some unfinished business after they died? I kind of like both theories, if I'm being honest. And finally, guys, thanks so much for watching. My name is Courtney, and I run a true horror channel here on YouTube. Like I said at the beginning of this video, I like to come on here every single week and tell you guys another true and scary story. So if that is something you're interested in seeing more of, make sure you hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell so you're notified every single time that I upload. And with that said, I'll see you all next week for another new video. Bye.